Hi guys, and welcome to another technical tutorial on the IBM Decision Server Insights DSI product. In this tutorial, what we're going to do is we're going to build a basic solution. So this is for those of us who are new to the product and want to see what it looks like to build a solution. So I'm assuming you've got some concept, some little concept of the architecture of the product. You know what an entity is, you know what an event is, and you know what an agent is. So in this solution, what we're going to do is we're going to build a project from scratch, build a solution from scratch. We're going to define the entity, we're going to define the event, we're going to build a rule agent, we're going to export the solution, we're going to deploy the solution, and then we're going to test the solution. So building almost any DSI-based solution involves some or all of these steps. So we'll take it slow and let's see where we end up. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've got a pretty fresh DSI Eclipse-based environment here. This is where we build our solutions for DSI. I'm going to right-click, select New, Build a Solution Project. Now my solution, I'm going to call it Basic, because this is just a basic solution. Nothing fancy in the name, no meaningful reasons that it has to be called Basic, but I'm calling mine Basic. The next thing it asks us for is the name of the BOM project, the Business Object Model. This is where we define the data which is going to be used in our solution. So my naming preference is the name of my solution followed by the word BOM. So if I created a solution called XYZ, the name of my BOM project would be XYZ BOM. That makes it nice and easy to find things. So we've created our solution. We notice we have 3 Eclipse projects created for us. The solution itself, the BOM project that we're going to edit in a moment, and something called the solution name -Java model. Now this is a technical project. There's usually, in fact I can't even think of any reason that you would want to go in and modify the stuff there. It just appears in your Eclipse environment. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to expand our BOM project, and we're going to select New Business Model Definition, or the BMD file, the Business Model Definition. This is where our definition of our entities and our events will be found. So it needs a package, and I usually call my package the same name in lowercase as my solution name. So I'm going to call it Basic, and we're brought up into the BMD editor. Now in here is where we can define our data structures for our entities and our events and our concepts and all kinds of other good things. So we're going to imaginatively create an entity now, and I'm going to call it Entity 1, entity number 1. I'm going to say is a business entity identified by a field called ID. So here we've created a very basic entity. Of course, we get entry assist with control space and control shift space, but I'm typing it out solidly here. So that defines an entity called Entity 1, which is defined as an entity, and it has a field in it called ID, which is the key field. So let's add some more fields to this, just a few. We'll say an Entity 1 has a field called F1. Nothing magic about this. I'm not making up any business solution. These are just names. These could be sales order and amount of sale, but I'm calling it Entity 1 and has a field called F1. And we'll create another field. We'll say Entity 2. Oh, no, sorry. Entity 1 has a field called F2. And finally, an entity 1 has a field called F3, which will say this one's an integer. And that's it. That's the end of our modeling of our business entity. Simple stuff. Now we'll define an event, and this is the event which is going to play eventually with this entity. So we'll say an Event 1 is a business event. That's it. Not much more to say about it than that. We'll add some fields in a moment, but we've now defined a thing called an event, and the name of that thing is called event 1. And we'll say an event 1 has a field called E1, and an event 1 has a field called E2. Simple as that. So we've now modeled both an entity and an event. Now we'll come back to this later to see it, but again, there's the entity and there's the event. I hit Control F to save my work, and we've now found under our BOM project that we now have a model of our entity and our event. Excellent. The next thing we want to do is we want to create some rules. So we'll go New Rule Agent Project, and the Rule Agent Project will allow us to create business rules in the Rule Agent language. So I'm going to call it Basic Rule Agent number 1. So my naming convention is solution name, the fact that it's a rule agent, and which rule agent set is it going to be. Because you can have multiple sets of rule agents. So I'm going to say that this is rule agent set number 1. I hit the finish button, and that creates yet another project, which is my rule agent project. You'll notice it's flagged as having an error. The error is contained in the file called agent.adsc, and that is the agent descriptor file. The agent descriptor file describes what kind of events this particular agent is interested in receiving and how to relate those to the entities that the agent manages. So if we look at the agent descriptor file, which was brought up for us, if I was to close it, I can open it again. Here's my agent descriptor file. We say that the agent descriptor, we say that we're going to relate to an entity. Now, context help here, I click on this, and it tells us, or gives us the option to select from our available entities. Since our solution only has one, makes it nice and easy. So I select that. Now it's asking us what events is this agent going to process. Again, we only have the one event, event 1, and we say that the entity associated with the agent comes from, we're going to say, the field E1 of the event. So what that says is when an event arrives, that event is going to carry with it a field called E1, or a property or an attribute called E1, and that E1 is going to be used as the key or identifier for finding our entity. If we look here, when I define my entity, I said it has a key. Now the key for the entity is known to the entity by a name of ID. Doesn't have to be ID, can be anything you like. And what we're saying is that the entity associated with this rule agent will be the entity which has an ID value that is the same value as the field passed in the E1 attribute of the event. Phew, that's a lot of words. Okay, so I've built my agent descriptor file. I now save it, and the error for the rule agent goes away. Now at this point we have no rules in our rule agent, so we need to build some. I select my rule agent project, select new, and select action rule. And now I get to define my rules. So we'll call this rule number 1 and hit the finish button. And now I'm placed in my rule editor. So we're going to want just a simple rule here because this is illustrative rather than functional. So we're going to say when an event 1 occurs, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do two things. I'm going to set the F3 field of my entity to the F3 of my entity. I'll just type it in, -1. Not minus 0, -1. What I'm going to do is the F3 the entity has a field in it called F3, and F3 is an integer, means it's numeric. And when an event arrives, I'm going to subtract 1 from it. Well, in fact, subtracting 1 is probably not a good thing. I'll add 1. We'll add 1 to that field. So every time we get an event, we'll see the entity's value increases by 1. The next thing I'm going to do is I want to print to the log that we were called. We'll say new value of F3 is, and we'll say something like the F3, the F3 of the entity, semicolon. Oh, looks like I've got a typo there. That should be a plus. There we go. So now we've built ourselves a simple rule. And this rule says whenever we see an event 1 with no qualifiers on it, then subtract subtract 1 from the F3 value of the entity and log something to the console. And that's it. We've built our solution. It's a very simple solution, but we've now built our solution. So the next thing we have to do is we have to export the solution in preparation for deployment. So I go up to the solution project, I right-click, and I select Export. Now, in the Export menu under Insight Designer, there is the option to export a solution archive. I hit the Next button there, and then I specify a path to a file that I'm going to write. Now, it doesn't have to be called basic.esa, and it doesn't have to be in this folder, but think of somewhere on your file system that this file is going to be written. I hit the Finish button, and the file is then exported. And if we were to look in that file system, once it's been exported, we would see it there. In fact, that's exactly what I will do. So here's my exports. The time now is 10:20 in the morning. I refresh my file and we see at 10:19 a copy of that file was written. So that shows us that we have an export file written. Great. Now it's time to work with the DSI server. So the DSI server in my case is already running. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a tool here to deploy my solution. Now, you might not have these tools. Let me show you what the command line for this deploy looks like. Let's see. Deploy solution. So what we're going to run here is the DSI Solution Manager command. You'll find that documented in the Knowledge Center, and it's going to execute a deploy local with a file that's going to be prompted. I like to build these commands so that I don't have to remember or find DOS command prompts to run these. Now, if I hit the Run button, it now prompts me for the file I want to install. I'll select my basic ESA, the one that I just exported, and hit the Finish button. If we look at the console for the deployment, it's cooking away and it's contacting the server and it says it has deployed it. If we look in our console for the DSI server, we see that the solution is now ready. So if I were now to send in events into my DSI server, they would be processed. So the way I'm going to do that is I've got another tool here, and I call this the JavaScript test driver. And what this tool does is it allows us to describe JavaScript, which when executed will allow us to run test driver scripts. Now, test driver is the IBM DSI supplied Java class, which allows us to run tests against the DSI server. And if you're comfortable using that, please go ahead and use that. I'm going to use this tool because, as I say, we're being illustrative. So I've got some scripts already prepared. So here's one, which we'll take a look at it. And what it does is it creates an entity of type entity1 with an ID of 1 here, and sets the fields on it. So it sets the field F1 to be F1, F2 to be F2, and F3 to be initially 0, and then loads that entity. Now, these are virtually the same steps as you would find in the Java test driver. So if you look at this code, freeze the screen at this point, you'll see that it's very, very understandable from a test driver perspective. So I hit the Run button and my entity was created. Now, how do I know it was created? In my tool here, I have a capability where I can select a solution and an entity. I can hit the Retrieve button and I'm now shown the values of my entity as it lives and as it occurs within the DSI server. So we see that initially the value of my F3 field is 0. Now I'm going to open another script. I'm going to open the create event script. And what this one does is this creates an instance of an event 1, sets the ID and the other fields on it, and then submits it for processing. So if I hit the run button on this script, we get the message that the event was submitted. If we look in our console, we see the message that was written by the print statement of our agent rule. So if we look again, here's the print statement in the agent rule, and we saw that it ran because we see that print statement in the console log of DSI. If we go back to our entities and I refresh the value of the entity, we will find that it's now got the value 1. So again, our logic for updating the entity was also executed. We bumped from 0 up to 1. And if I run my script again, I'll run it 2 more times, run it once, run it twice, and then go back to the entities, refresh it, expand, and we see it's now 3. And that, in about 15 minutes, was a complete DSI solution from the ground up. So again, to recap, we built a solution from nothing. We defined a BOM. We defined the BMD file, which defined the entity and the events that we're going to work with. This was data modeling. We then created a rule agent project, and we then modified the rule agent project's agent descriptor to relate the entities and events together. Next, we built a rule, which in this case was very simple. It says when an event occurs, do some simple work. We exported the solution to a file on the file system, and then we ran a script to deploy the solution to the running DSI server. Finally, we ran a test driver set of scripts in order to execute the creation of an entity and the creation of an event. I hope you found this tutorial, this technical presentation useful. I look forward to many more to come. Thank you now. Bye-bye.